Good evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Councillor Will Cross, Chair of the Strategic Environment, Planning and Transport Committee. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's meeting, which will be using equipment connecting the chamber into a Microsoft Teams meeting. There's a live stream available through Teams, and a recording of this meeting will be uploaded to the Council's website afterwards. Apologies for absence. I've had Councillor Singh's apologies and nobody else's. No. OK. Declarations of interest. Are there any of those from anybody? No. OK. We move on to item 2, which is minutes of the previous Strategic Environment Planning and Transport Committee meetings, which you all have read. Are they all agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 3 is minutes of the Traffic Management Subcommittee from March. Are they agreed? Agreed. It's agreed. And item 4 are the minutes of other bodies, namely the Joint Waste Disposal Board, the AWE Local Liaison Committee and the Reading Climate Change Partnership Board. Are they all agreed? Agreed. That's great. Item 5 is petitions. I've been informed that there are none. And item 6 is questions from councillors and members of the public, of which there are none. So if we can move on to item 7, Reading Transport Strategy 2040 draft for consultation. I'm going to hand over to Chris Maddox.
Great, thanks very much, Chair. Yes, so the purpose of this report is to provide an overview of the work undertaken to prepare the draft Reading Transport Strategy 2040, which is the proposed new local transport plan for the borough, and to seek approval to undertake a 12-week statutory public consultation on the draft strategy document. As set out within the report, the strategy has been developed to contribute towards wider objectives relating to health and well-being, the climate emergency, air quality and an inclusive economy. The strategy includes an overarching vision for the future provision of transport choices in Reading, alongside 5 key supporting objectives. The document sets out the main challenges and opportunities for the plan period, a range of policies, schemes and initiatives aimed at providing attractive, sustainable alternatives to the private car, alongside a set of key performance indicators to monitor the progress of delivering the strategy. The draft strategy sets the overarching policy direction for transport in Reading, with sub-strategies such as the Bus Service Improvement Plan, the BSIP, and the Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan, the LCWIP, which provide further detail on individual elements of this overarching strategy. It has been developed with significant public consultation to date, including a visioning consultation which we undertook in 2019. This was to set the overall direction of the strategy and received some really great feedback as part of that consultation. And then a consultation on the draft document at the time in 2020. And that was during the pandemic, that was online. We did receive some good feedback, which has been used to update the document, but obviously that was a few years ago now. So we have subsequently updated the strategy since these 2 consultations. This is both to reflect the latest available data on travel behaviours and also to reflect kind of policy direction which has changed since that time, of which the BSIP is one of those. We are still awaiting new guidance from the Department for Transport on the development of local transport plans. However, as stated in the report, we do have an opportunity to incorporate any feedback or any key aspects of this guidance within an updated strategy alongside feedback received as part of the consultation, if it's approved this evening. And then just one thing that I do need to point out, which has been brought to my attention, and apologies for this, is that the issue and outcome text for the Oxford Road multimodal scheme and the London Road active travel scheme has been mixed up. So essentially, you've got the text for the London Road scheme under the Oxford Road scheme and vice versa. Not quite sure how that happened, but it has been updated now, but not before the papers were published for this meeting. But clearly that will be corrected for the consultation if it is approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and I think that's been minuted. I'm now going to hand over to the lead councillor for climate strategy and transport, John Ennis.
Thanks ever so much. Now, I will say I'm very. It's a privilege to be able to discuss here today a transport strategy for 2040, looking at the draft for consultation. I firstly want to thank the officers, thank Chris and the team. I'll get a bit closer here. Thank the officers and the team, you know, who've got a hell of a lot of work and activity have put this together. It's an amazingly comprehensive but flexible strategy together to go out to consultation. And I really hope councillors, a bit disappointed with the turnout tonight, but that's life, isn't it? You know, that's the way it goes. Get involved, because I think we want to look at it. It all affects us, and get the people, particularly the people of Reading, want to get young people and the people in Reading engaged with it. And one of the reasons I'm quite excited, because again, I haven't told many people this, but I'm born and reared in Reading. I don't think I've said that many times, but I'll say it now. Is that, and I've seen the town. It's a great football team, and it will recover. Don't worry, Councillor Andrew. It's to see the way the town has changed growing up, and I think, you know, it's a tribute to people like Councillor Page, Councillor Lovelock, the way the town has developed in the 90s, the way it's changed and it's developed. And we as councillors, and this is a very great opportunity for us, cross-party, to create a new vision for Reading in the next 17 years. What does travel look like in 17 years' time? And that's a major issue, and everybody will be affected. And that's why we really push that everybody has a look, has a read. It's big, it's flexible, it's comprehensive. You name it, it's in there. Car clubs, Councillor Borsden, everything that's in there, talking about the future. Motorcycling, cycling, buses, walking, a modal shift. And it's a flexible document, and we want to get people involved, and we want people to be able to shape their own future. We're doing this. We have to do this, of course, but we want to create a vision for Reading. But every town should have a transport plan, and it should be guided from national government. Local government, the local transport plan is guided by the national government. As of yet, and I'll correct me if I'm wrong, we still are waiting national guidance from the Conservative government as to what they would be looking to, what's to be included in the transport plan. They've done, governments in the past have put guidance down. We haven't got that, but we're still going ahead. We're still going ahead because we want to build a vision. We want to build a vision for the people of Reading for what the future looks like. And I believe a lot of it is in there. As I said, the plan is comprehensive and flexible enough to consult and deliver on options. It's a high level strategic plan, and I believe it's transformational. There's stretch targets, reduction of car journeys, whilst taking into consideration business vehicles. You know, we may start out by saying we cannot expect businesses and many people who do rely on the car. They rely on the car, they need the car. There's cultural discussions. We've had discussions as councillors about cultural issues of transport and diversity needs of transport, including the car, which for many is a very flexible mode of travel. And as I said in the media, you can't get a ladder on the bus and you can't get your toolbox on the back of a bike. And what we'll be doing is having discussions with people who need to use the car. Is what form of transport. We got another document which is going to be linked in a minute. The EV, electric vehicle, having discussions. At the same time, we're talking to the people of Reading. Do you need to make those car journeys? We have to have a linked up modal shift of travel. There's going to be thousands of new homes built, mainly outside the borough, are going to be right on the edges of the town from the north, the east and the west. And if we don't do anything, if we stick with the status quo, we'll have mass congestion. If we don't make the challenge, we'll have Reading grinding to a halt and choking on fumes. We need to think about giving our people of Reading the chance to breathe, to have healthy travel. And the three strategic aims are a healthy environment, thriving communities, and an inclusive economy. And that, we believe, is being addressed in the actual plan itself. We want to double bus journeys. We want new routes to be linked up with bus lanes. We want new routes north of the river. In other areas, we want routes outside of the town. We want to embrace and build the successes of the Mere Oak and the Park and Ride to the east, to have straightforward bus journeys which will take minutes rather than stuck in traffic. We want people to be looking at walking, to have healthier lifestyles, to be fitter, and we want cycling. Cycling is a major part of the transport strategy, and what we want to do is to link up, and you can see it in the document itself where there's maps of how cycling lanes will be linked up. To say to our colleagues who cycle and the cycle forums and our friends in the voluntary sector is, yes, we're not there yet, but the intent is massive. And if you look at the linkage of we're looking, in the east and whatever on the Bath Road and coming through, is that the intent is there and the plans are there. And please have a look and make suggestions as well. We also want to work in cooperation with our neighbours. The Third Thames Bridge is a massive, major part of modal transport coming through Reading. We want the Third Thames Bridge. I cannot remember when we didn't talk about the Third Thames Bridge. I'm 60 now. I'll be 77 when this 2014. My maths is good. And are we still going to be talking about a third bridge? Are we still going to be talking about that? We want that. We want to work with our partners in Oxfordshire. We want to work with them to have a transport shift away from Reading, where people don't need to come into the town. We'll move forward. Now, if we don't get that, if we don't get the Third Thames Bridge and there continues to be a block, an obstacle, and again, residents in north of the Reading, of the river in Caversham, they're feeling that all the time about the lack of a Third Thames Bridge, then we'll have a look at something else. We'll have a look at congestion. We'll have a look at what we would call a rat run charge. We'll have a look at that. We will we'll take that forward. Up to 25%, I think one of the studies was given, up to 25% of traffic on the IDR, particularly coming from the north into the town, has no destination in our town. It has no destination. And we want to look at that. Reading should not be a through rat run area for people to come out to go elsewhere. They need to use the A34. They need to use other forms of the roads and not use us as a through traffic. And we'll be looking at that. And if we take 25% of traffic out of the 4074 and the north of the river going in, that will give people of Caversham and people in the centre a chance to breathe. We must sort out our emissions and give people a chance to breathe. And we want realistic, affordable, sustainable alternatives to the car. And buses, cycling, walking is a way forward. I've got a load more, but I think I better call them to come to a conclusion, because it will get to 2040 by the time I'm finished. We want a modal shift. We had a climate change emergency in 2019. We called that, and this is a chance now to turbocharge our work on climate change. We want to ensure that we get to net zero carbon by 2030. And we believe firmly that this document will go a long, long way into securing that, whilst giving people good alternatives. The status quo is not an option. For people to talk about keep it as it is, I don't want to change, it can't happen. It can't happen. The interconnectedness of bus, rail, cycle, of walking has got to be the future. We've got to look at the climate emergency. We've got to look at emissions. We've got to look at people stuck in traffic and be transformative and build on our successes. I'll finish on our successes. There's a paper coming up on what we've been able to achieve, with Green Park, the upgrades, a successful bus service, it's one of the best in the country. Active travel successes on page 44. There's case studies on Christchurch Bridge, and there's discussions about a modal shift. So that's what we're looking at in this document. We want it to go out, agree tonight, to go out into consultation. There's talks about how we can work with people who are going to be car drivers or have to use a car. There's car clubs. There's bits about motorcycles. There's bits about pedestrians being safe on the pavement, of cyclists being safe on the roads, and people being able to breathe. I'll finish on that and look forward to the discussion. And this is just the beginning of a brand new vision that we can give to the people of Reading, and it starts now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ennis, and it's great to see such leadership being provided by the Labour administration of this town, implementing the aspects of our manifesto to do with this. This town has won awards, as we know, for climate and for public transport, so I think that's to be commended. Councillor Lanzoni.
Thank you, Chair. I very much welcome this draft of the Reading Transport Strategy, and I would like to draw the attention of colleagues on 2 points in particular, which stood while I read multiple times the document. The first one is the great way, from my point of view, in which officers have been able to capture the change in the usage of transport and public transport in particular of our residents. Before COVID, we typically had people going to certain key locations, the station, the city center, the town center. Following that in a very, I would say, effective way, our local public transport network was built in a way which was maximizing the capacity for this type of traveling. It's what I've discovered in transport policy. Apparently it's called a star topology, where basically from every point of the town you can reach certain key places in the middle, the station, Friar Street, our town center. So much so that, for example, if someone like me living in Lower Caversham wanted to go to Caversham Heights to help campaigning for the next election, it will be shorter for me to take a bus going into town and then from town going back to Caversham Heights. Now data are showing us that our residents have started, and it's my personal belief that this change will remain, have started changing this pattern completely. Our residents travel to local amenities, parks, gyms, facilities. The traffic going to the station is much, much less. The traffic going to the city center is much, much less. And I think there will be a lot of work that we as council with our residents will need to do in the coming year with Reading Borough Council to redraw the way we think of our transport network. So this is the first point. Second point, which I was very, very pleased to see in the strategy, and I have been just now very, very pleased to hear the lead councillor, is about the Cross Thames travel, basically the third bridge. I represent Caversham, and traffic is a priority issue for us. And we discuss so much about things like the roadwork, stopping north of the river, City Fibre, Instalcom, Thames Water. And we shouldn't forget why these issues become such a big pain in the backside for our residents. And the reason is the quantity of traffic north of the river. We shouldn't forget the obstacle put in front of a third bridge. And I think the strategy in the cross-Thames travel is very good at capturing what the status and the positions are. There is a lot of run-through traffic crossing and polluting Caversham. There is a strong need to address the limited existing river crossing And if our administration will continue not to be given answers to that from the government and from neighboring local authorities, we should definitely be brave enough to take new actions on it. So I welcome very much this part of the policy, of the strategy. Many other positive points. Thank you very much for the officer for working on it. And again, it's a draft. We will have to do a lot of work all together to make it work for our residents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. The next person I had indicating was Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank officers for all the work on the strategy document and for taking the time out to provide me with a very useful briefing. I'd also like to thank Councillor Ennis for taking time out to chat with me about it as well, very useful. It is an extensive document, 180 pages long. I've read it all and I'm glad to see my feedback about the mix-up of Oxford Road and London Road content has been remedied. That's already in the document, just to show I did read the whole thing, because I spotted that. Reading is, of course, the confluence of the M4, the A4, large capacity rail network and extensive bus network. So it is right that we have such a transport strategy. I think it's also right that we don't wait for the guidance from the DfT, which may never emerge. And I appreciate officers being proactive with taking this forward in that regard and being nimble enough to respond to when there is potential guidance, if indeed any. The concept for third Thames crossing is a conversation that has been ongoing for a very, very long time. And it is very ambitious to talk about this in the document. So I hope we can make some level of progress on this, and I will be speaking to my colleagues who lead Oxfordshire County Council, South Oxfordshire District Council and Woking and Borough Council, which are the other councils affected, to see whether we can progress the conversation on that side of things as well. There are nuggets of interest in this document to me and around, and especially around the demand management space. It's been a long policy of Reading Liberal Democrats for some level of emissions or clean air zones. And there is talk of a green parking tariff or road user charging. And there is a possibility that can be delivered via something like a low emission zone for the highest polluting industrial traffic, as we talk about the through traffic especially, which I would welcome. But obviously the devil will be in the detail and we'll see what actually comes out later. But that is certainly, it's good to see that in the strategy at all. I'm also interested to see talk for West Reading Park and Ride, affect the residents of Tilehurst and the residents of West Berkshire. Again, I'll be speaking to my colleagues who the Liberal Democrats lead West Berkshire Council now, so I'll be speaking to them about that as well. Yeah, we are actually completely surrounded by Liberal Democrat run councils here in Reading now. Funny that. Sorry. We'll also be also interested to see the cycle hire scheme, and obviously we did have that before, but it didn't work in Reading with ReadyBike, and it didn't include West of Reading at all, really. So it'll be interesting to see any future thing that affects West Reading in terms of that. But very, very happy to go to consultation, and yeah, overall good document. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. My next person I saw indicating is Councillor Keeping.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Great document, and thank you to the officers for the work they've done on this and for the briefings they've given us. I'm just going to bring it briefly to a ward-specific point in that residents on Kentwood Hill in particular and the area around it do miss the bus service that they used to have a number of years ago and do keep asking about getting it back. I'd just like to highlight that this is the perfect opportunity for them to have their say and encourage them to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Balston.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for being a few minutes late. First of all, I'd like to thank officers for the briefing we were given on this substantial document. I've a few points that I'd like to go through, please. The proposed strategy is ambitious and comprehensive, and broadly the Conservative group welcomes it. Increased capacity at pinch points, traffic signal upgrades, safety enhancements, removal of excessive street furniture and increased landscaping and vegetation is all to be welcomed, making particularly the lives of partially sighted people with the removal of excessive street furniture is something I specifically welcome. We continue as a group to support a third Thames Bridge. Improvements to the bus network are welcome, and bus rapid transport corridors and the superbus should be supported in principle, but the council must provide evidence that new bus lanes and bus priority measures will reduce congestion rather than increase it. Specifically, I'm thinking of the proposals for London Road, which we've got concerns over. The plans for Reading cycle network are good, but the current state of the network does not inspire confidence that the council can deliver. Reducing private vehicle capacity alone on the IDR will not necessarily reduce congestion and could increase it. Beyond infuriating drivers, what plans do the council have for encouraging modal shift for those travelling into central Reading by this route? Green parking charges should be opposed. This would mean drivers of older, more polluting vehicles pay more for parking in central Reading than those with electric or hybrid vehicles. It would therefore disproportionately disadvantage those on lower incomes who cannot afford electric vehicles but have no choice to drive. Road space reallocation should be based on evidence and local engagement, which demonstrate its effectiveness. Road user charging is where private vehicle taxation is going. Road tax and fuel duty are opaque, whereas the pay as you drive system with allowances for those with no option but to drive is fairer. However, the road user charging, as proposed, is effectively a congestion charge, and for a long time our group has opposed congestion charging. Demand response transport proposals should be opposed. It has been tested across the country, including in Oxford, and doesn't work. Evidence is required that there will be demand for the park and rides proposed to justify them. The mobility as a service proposals are good. An integrated app for all modes is a great idea. Car clubs are welcome. One car club car removes on average 20 private cars from the roads. It is considerably cheaper than owning a car, providing mobility to low-income households. Shared foot and cycleways should be opposed. They work for neither pedestrians nor cyclists, and the latter avoid using them in favour of the road. While there is mention of exclusivity and accessibility for everyone, there is nothing specific on wheeling, i.e. provisions for those in wheelchairs or reliant on Zimmer frames for mobility. Traffic calming measures and 20 mph zones should only be implemented after genuine consultation with local residents affected and with their consent. To conclude, Chair, I'd like to ask the lead councillor what reassurance he will give residents that this statutory consultation is worth their effort to respond to, as in if there is substantial opposition to any particular aspects, will the administration commit to reassessing those aspects and bringing it back to councillors to discuss? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boulston. Chris.
Okay, thanks very much for the feedback, really helpful. Yeah, so just a couple of points I was going to pick up. So yeah, in terms of evidence around bus lanes, so obviously we've got the proposals for the 6 bus lanes as part of the BSIP package at the moment, as discussed at Traffic Management Subcommittee. So we are working on some modelling around looking at the impacts of those proposals, and that information will be made available. So take that point on board. Around demand management, so I think, you know, there's a range of options in terms of what a demand management scheme could look like, and that's definitely something that we need to look into in more detail to make sure there's no unintended consequences of any scheme that may be brought forward in the future. In terms of shared paths, then, you know, absolutely where there is the ability to provide separate segregated cycle facilities, that's definitely our aim, particularly on the major routes within the borough. sometimes, you know, either in terms of space, in terms of the actual physical capacity of road space in a certain location, that isn't always possible. Shared footpaths, whilst not ideal, can provide a good alternative, particularly for less confident cyclists, be that children or others. And more confident cyclists, you know, do still have the option to use the road. So, you know, that isn't our first aim, isn't to put in a shared path, but if that's what is feasibly possible, then that does provide some benefits. And then in terms of wheeling, yeah, I mean, I think some of the things that we have done and we'll be looking at doing more in the future is things like raised tables over side roads. So where we put in a scheme, then just having that level provision across the side road can be really helpful. And even simple things like sometimes the drop curb doesn't, you know, actually get to the bottom of the footpath in the road. So there's kind of a bit of a bump, and that can be really difficult for people. So things like that, whilst, you know, in terms of costs are relatively minor, can make a massive difference. So whenever we look at a scheme, then we'd always look at that sort of thing as part of the overall scheme.
Thank you. I'm going to take Councillor McElroy's question next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. And thank you to officers. From our discussions, it's quite clear to me that the team are very passionate about this work and will do everything in their power to make it a reality. I shared this plan with a few members of the public, and what came back over and over again, surprisingly, was where is the ambition and urgency in practice? For example, on cycle journeys to their town centre, pre-pandemic Oxford already consistently hits the mid-20%, and Cambridge averages around 40%. Our target here is 15%. You can see this on page 172, Performance Indicator 10, where a baseline figure of 5.8% is attributed to 21-22. A bit of digging reveals that it was published in 21-22, but the data is actually from 2021 in the middle of the pandemic, a point that is lower than most of the others. I understand that the reason the plan was delayed was to avoid the data blip caused by the pandemic, but here it seems to have been used to set a very low baseline, which is of course convenient for the council and presumably justifies the lack of ambition. To put this into context, what this means is that when my 4-year-old is in his 20s and Councillor Ennis in his late 70s, we're hoping to reach something that's just 3% higher than something we've hit before. Anyway, let me get out of the weeds into something a bit more high level. Here we have a document aiming to fix the problems caused by a Labour council stuck in its own traffic for decades. Don't get me wrong, it's a positive document, and we applaud the vision for a cleaner, greener Reading, but it's not new. We've seen it before in previous Reading transport strategies that have obviously failed one after the other, or we wouldn't have this one that we have now. There is little space dedicated in the report to self-reflection on past failures. In this new strategy, we see the buck being passed to out-of-towners polluting our pristine air, to everything being dependent on external funding. Reading Labour are just lowering our expectations because they expect to fail again. Where is the urgent and immediate and specific, I say specific plans to deal with the dementia, the lung cancer, the kids with asthma that come from all this pollution? The new secondary school failed on something as simple as having enough bike racks. I fear that we can expect more of that, but at scale. Where's the backup plan for when we don't get central funding? It doesn't cost £1 million to install a few strategically placed bollards. It takes courage, which this administration and this plan lacks. And so I'm left with the impression that 10, 20 years from now, we'll be still stuck in the same traffic, still breathing in Reading Labour's pollution and greenwash and talking about that third bridge. I'm sure the public are looking forward to telling us what they think of this PR document, and Greens will of course support them having that opportunity. I say to them, buyer beware.
Thank you. I have indications from Councillor Page and Councillor Hornsby Smith, and then we're going to conclude this item. Councillor Page.
Chair, thank you. Can I just firstly thank colleagues for their comments. Councillor Moore rightly referenced the lack of the DFT guidance. Normally, one wouldn't attach too much attention to DFT guidance, but it has been trialled as including that important new element referenced in paragraph 2.5, namely the requirement to quantify carbon reduction benefits resulting from delivery of the LTP. Now, is it any surprise that a document that was completed by civil servants over a year ago and is ready to be published has not been? It is being blocked by government ministers because of the politics around this and their retreat on the climate agenda. And we only had earlier this week a Conservative peer, John Selwyn Gummer, as we used to know and love him when he was an MP, now Lord Deben, putting the boot into the government because of their retreat from the climate agenda. And this is another example, the refusal, and it's a refusal by ministers to publish the guidance. It's not that more work needs to be done, it was done last year. And indeed, I was at a seminar earlier this year in London where the chief civil servant actually confided that the work had been done. It was awaiting ministerial clearance, and that's where it sits. And the reason it isn't being published is because this Conservative government is running away and abrogating its responsibilities for any form of climate leadership. So we press on with the consultation, and rightly so. And it lacks it does not lack any ambition through you to Councillor McElroy. It updates and brings forward realistic policies that will deliver on an agenda that is being popular locally, that delivers some of the highest bus usage in the country. And unlike green administrations like Brighton that have been swept into the history books, this administration received further validation only a few weeks ago. And the dismal performance of Greens here and the Tories locally indicates that we have the confidence of the local electorate, and we're going to build on that. And it means, through you, Chair, to Councillor Ballston, that we will obviously take on board and listen carefully to and engage with the consultation process. And unlike Councillor Ballston, I hope the consultation process will not deliberately mislead the public as to what the strategy involves, because there is no congestion charge proposed. She'd spent 2 hours or whatever it was with Chris Maddox and James Turner the other evening and doesn't seem to have even understood what the proposals are. There is no congestion charge proposed here. The charge we're talking about is on those vehicles that use Reading as a shortcut, not those that legitimately want to come into the town, Councillor Ballston. We are proposing a charge, or one of the options is to put a charge on all vehicles that simply drive through Reading as a shortcut. They bring nothing to the town other than pollution and congestion. They don't even stop for a cup of tea. So the benefit in economic terms is nil. In pollution, it's very serious, and in air quality, even more damaging. Now, if Councillor Ballston wants to take to the barricades to defend the rights of those people abusing our road network locally, then fine, go for it, and we'll clinch that 3rd seat in Caversham Heights next year. But let's come back to the more serious comments that have been made this evening. The first point about I'd just like to pick up on, it relates to the cycling target, because Councillor McElroy and others locally say that we are lacking ambition on that front, and then they compare us with cities like Oxford and Cambridge. Well, Councillor McElroy, you might like to look at the bus use.
Could you keep
figures.
the comments through the chair, please, Councillor
Yes,
Page?
I will. Through you, Chair, to Councillor McElroy, look at the bus usage figures in Oxford and Cambridge, way, way lower than Reading, and therefore, the proportion cycling in the town is quite a bit higher. Now, are you arguing that we should be looking to reduce bus usage and get them onto bikes? That seems to be what you're suggesting.
Councillor Page, I'm not suggesting anything. David McElroy may be. Could you please direct your comments to the chair?
I would suggest that you look at the wider provision of public transport and then set that against the cycling targets, because that is what we are doing in Reading. And we're looking to expand bus usage in a way that Oxford and Cambridge sadly are still somewhat behind. Now, in terms of the bus lane provision along the London Road, I found it a bit intriguing that Councillor Balston says she broadly welcomes the document and then starts promptly asking questions and querying our ability to deliver bus lanes that are of effect and substance. Through you to Councillor Balston, I would remind her that we have the highest proportion of bus lanes per mile of road of any town or city outside of London. The reason we have that is to underpin our very successful bus undertaking. And the reason patronage rises is because reliability is an important part of that. For Councillor Balston to suggest that somehow we're going to come forward with a bus lane proposal that isn't going to benefit our excellent public transport network ignores the fact that we have been in consultation for years with Reading Buses. They strongly support that, and I would suggest if Councillor Balston wants a tutorial on the benefit of bus lanes, she arranges that with Robert Williams and colleagues, and I'm sure they'll be happy to oblige her. So in conclusion, Chair, the final point I wanted to make, and that relates to the Third Thames Bridge and Cross Thames travel. Over many decades, I have sat in meetings along with officers here with South Oxfordshire and Oxfordshire, with parish councils, and been assured that they are keen to engage with us. They haven't, and that's, by the way, Lib Dem administrations as well. If Councillor Moore can get South Oxfordshire to focus on the fact that they border Reading, that would be good, because their focus is essentially around Didcot, as is the county councils, and they treat the south of their county with disdain. And one of the last remaining tools in our box that hopefully will bring them to the table will be a charge that could face many of their residents for using Reading as a shortcut. Those that come into Reading legitimately would not face a charge, whether it be by car to park in their car parks or whether it's on our buses. But those residents of Oxfordshire that continue to treat Reading as a shortcut should, in my opinion, face a substantial charge for doing that. And that is one of the options we have here. Now, if that brings Oxfordshire County Council to the table and South Oxfordshire, then all's the good. But Councillor Moore, you'll have your time cut out in getting them to the table. I believe that this proposal, this option in our transport plan should hopefully get them to sit up, because it's in their interests as well. And I can never understand why Oxfordshire has been quite so happy to see lorries and cars that should be on the A34 and the M4 trundling down the 4074 through some very pleasant villages with loads of listed buildings right up to the highway being shaken to their foundations. But perhaps they might like to answer to our local electors. So if Oxfordshire engage with us and support such a charge, then the case for a bridge may be reduced. But Oxfordshire has got to recognise the status quo is not an option. And we have a duty of care to our local residents in terms of improving air quality and reducing congestion. And if reducing that congestion on some of the roads north of the river then enables more reliable bus services to be introduced, or existing services to be expanded, then it's in our interest and the interests of local residents as well. So, Chair, this has been a delayed consultation. Those of us who were members of SEPT in March 2020 were all poised to come in here, and Michael Graham rushed in to tell us we had to go home following the start of the pandemic, and we're now picking up the resumed transport plan. It's been updated, it's been improved, and I wish the consultation well and look forward to participating in that along with my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Page, and finally Councillor Hornsby-Smith.
Well, I thought I'd only speak for a quarter of an hour, but anyway, thank you, Chair. I wanted to pick up on a couple of points that were made from the other side of the chamber. About new cycle lanes, they are generally segregated, as the officer pointed out, where possible, and that is set out in the funding regulations. Just for point of interest, the London Road scheme had 60% support when it was first consulted upon. I think we also ought to make sure that when we consult about these schemes, we're not just consulting people who drive in their cars and get slightly put off by the fact there's only 2 lanes going into Reading instead of 3. We ought to also make sure that we consult the medics of the kids who end up having asthma and respiratory illnesses locally. So that's the first point. The second point is that bus lanes do increase access. They increase access to the town centre. And the example I give is the 60% increase in the take-up of the bus service along the rapid transit system in South Reading. The third point is that in terms of the bus lanes that are along the London Road that are being proposed, these will reduce the journey time from areas of South Reading used by the bus, and that will be a net gain for everybody along those roads. The fourth point is really to address this comparison with Oxford, which I know quite well. Oxford has a complete ring road. It is outside the city centre. We don't have that luxury. It's also a university town, and the students very often have to travel between different colleges to go to different lectures. So it's not comparing light with light, and the same thing is with Cambridge as well. So I don't think the comparison is there at all. And as Councillor Page pointed out, Chair, what we are looking at is a town which has got fantastic bus use, and that's one of our focuses. The next point that I wanted to make is that just in terms of that London Road scheme, Councillor McElroy mentioned the lack of ambition and courage of this council in its strategy, or proposed strategy here. Strategy for consultation in which everybody can comment on. That lack of courage was very interesting when it transferred to that consultation a couple of years ago about the active transport scheme for cycle lanes, both two-way cycle lanes along the London Road. I just remember when I was campaigning in Redlands Ward, just how silent the Green Party were, because their vote is predominantly both from people who drive in and car drivers, people who drive in, and some cyclists. So they were completely divided on it, and that lack of leadership also transferred itself when we were discussing the importance of Sidmouth Street in linking in with the wider cycling network, which this council is trying to create. They opposed it. So just coming back to Councillor Moore, I'm glad to have been able to afford you the opportunity to claim credit for the corrections in the document. What can I say? I once also did bring up the issue of the third bridge when I was going for an interview with South Oxfordshire District Council, and I can just say I'm still here because it wasn't a successful strategy. Anyway, I wanted to focus really on what we're doing here tonight, because as everybody has said, this has been a massive amount of work that has gone into this vision, and I really do to laud the officers for the amount of work that's gone in and the consultation that has happened that has led up to this document. This document sets out a vision that is ambitious, and it's in line with the strategy document about what we want as a town in Reading for 2050. It's a vision of a high quality lifestyle, a healthy lifestyle. I think this document is a really good basis for consultation because it is alert to new technology. That's one of the features. It's alive to the impact of climate change, of housing growth, and the need to deal with the problems that we've got of air quality. So there's some really good ideas here, and those include the practical schemes like the bus lanes, the park and ride networks, and those are linked obviously to the third bridge in part. In my ward, I've seen the development of Shinfield Road and the care that has been taken in terms of that cycle lane to make sure that the surface is a good surface for cyclists to use. So we're looking at ways of trying to tackle congestion. We're looking at things like carpooling. We're looking at the whole impact of electric vehicles, of autonomous vehicles. And I think in that sense, this is a really useful document to consult on. It sets out a clear leadership and direction of travel that we want to go in. And it shows people that we cannot stay where we are in the face of growth of cars, growth of number of residents, and the amount of commuting. So I would just like to commend this and support it for going up for consultation. And of course, we will listen to all the responses. That is the ethos of this Labour leadership. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I think most of the main technical points were from Councillor Ballston, which you've already picked up. So unless there's anything, I'm going to hand over to John.
Yeah,
Councillor Ennis.
No worries. There was a question raised, wasn't there? Someone said to me, "What do you reckon will go tonight?" Because I'm going to try and draw a non-political, perhaps a bit naive, non-political party division as far as travel is concerned and transport. And you'll get the Greens saying it's not green enough, and the Conservatives saying it's too green. I was going to, use the old analogy that they really are chasing the same sort of vote at the end of the day. Two cheeks of the same backside, but I won't actually say that. Because at least Councillor Ballston attempted to engage and make points which, are relevant. They're relevant. And I'll try to answer them because she asked a question. I was very disappointed. I expected a lot better. This is a very green agenda. Well, you look at you're just out to design like, it's childish. And I didn't expect that. But we're going to get that total party politics from the Greens, who opposed Sidmouth Street, opposed every BREEAM, application on planning, because they really want to run the town down. They want to run the town down. They're councillors of the town, and they want to run the town down and step back and go, there you go, Green councillors told you so. That is my ending now, as far as the Green Party is concerned, on what is a hugely green agenda that I really want them to get involved with. So I'm now going to spend an ounce of time on Councillor Ballston's questions that you raised. About the consultation, I will throw back to you both, is that don't try and muddy it. Don't try and make party political issues with the consultation, because we're going to be here with people that some of you are going to drag in there when we're trying to make net zero carbon, when we're trying to do stuff, and you're going to be shouting and bawling at us because we're either not.
Can we not have you, please? It needs to be directed through the chair.
Sorry, Chair, that we're not going to do that. I ask you to get involved as legitimate, through the chair, Councillor Cross. I'm asking the opposition to get involved in the genuine consultation and here, because actually, when we look at the consultation on page 65, because there was over 3,000 responses. I don't know, through the chair, Councillor Ballston's read that. There was some really good respondents coming back. 93% for 3,000 responses, 2,750 face-to-face. For public transport journeys, faster, more reliable, will be effective. It's worth reading. 83% comprehensive. So we've had some feedback through the chair, to Councillor Ballston. We'd appeal to yourself to get involved in that and try to get. your own constituents. Because if you don't do it, we'll do it for you. We'll do it for you. We'll tell the people of Park Ward that we want to get the air. We want to get the air breathable. We want to get children with proper air. You know, the Greens are campaigning against every single thing that we've attempted to do. But we'll tell the people of Park Ward they're not there to represent you. They're there to run the town down. And they don't do it, we'll do it. We'll talk about getting decent congestion-free roads, get good cycle lanes. Sidmouth Street will be linked up. Read the report. Read the report. It will be linked up. So you can see some of the consultation has been good. Again, through the chair, to go back to Councillor Balsdon, and this is an important point that you've made, but it's an important point that you need to hear as well. There is no intention whatsoever, as Councillor Page has said through the chair, after a reminder, that there will be a congestion charge for anybody travelling into our town, living in our town, travelling in for leisure or for work purposes. What we believe, and the evidence is there, it will be there, and there'll be more verification of it, is up to, was it 25% of vehicles travelling through the area of North Reading with no destination. Now, rather than hit the hard-working people of Reading who want to build our town and make our town, you know, as energetic and as flourishing, is we will stop them from using them as a shortcut. We will stop people who have no intent in coming into Reading and using the services or working there, but travelling to places outside. We will stop them, and we will be looking at that. There'll be no intentions whatsoever of a congestion charge of people travelling into Reading for work, leisure or residential. And I think that's really important. Thanks for the discussion. It's just the beginning. You know, let's hope the people of Reading, already we can see there's been some really good consultations and discussions on that. And I look forward to it. I look forward to coming back. And it's great, I'm going to say it once more, and I will finish, is that a lot of work, and that's why it's so sad to run down council officers. We have experts in this town who are working their socks off as officers to ensure the best reports. We got one online there. We listen to experts. We really value the work that someone has spent and took their time out to get a decent qualification to know about modal transport and strategy. We listen to experts, and experts have taken time out to actually, to get this report ready for engagement and consultation. I'd like to thank them, and I'd like to put this to the people in Reading, and let's have a good discussion, a proper discussion and an adult discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. And talk about telling the residents of Park Ward. You can tell the residents of Redlands about that as well. I think they'd be interested to hear.
Oh, just for the comments, we've got a good councillor in Redlands Ward, Councillor Cross.
Okay, moving on to the recommendations. The committee, and thank you to members for your contributions to that debate. I'm conscious of the passage of time, so I'm going to move to the recommendations. The committee is asked to note the work that which has been undertaken to draft the draft Reading Transport Strategy and to provide approval to undertaking the public consultation. Is that agreed? Thank you. Okay, the next item is EV Infrastructure Strategy Draft for Consultation. Chris, I believe that's you again.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. So this is the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Charging Strategy. Purpose of the report is to provide an overview of the work undertaken to prepare the draft strategy for Reading and to seek approval to undertake a public consultation on the draft strategy as part of the consultation on the local transport plan that we've just been discussing. Whilst it is recognised that we need to achieve a modal shift to sustainable modes to achieve our overarching LTP vision and objectives, private cars will still be used for necessary trips, and therefore the transition to electric vehicles is particularly important to achieve our climate emergency objectives. Due to the nature of housing in Reading, with a significant proportion not having off-street parking, one key element of this draft strategy is the particular need to provide charging infrastructure in these streets without the off-street parking. to enable residents to transition to electric vehicles, which will help achieve the overall objectives of this strategy. So subject to approval from the committee, we will review all feedback received through the consultation, update the draft strategy accordingly, and bring it back to a future meeting of the committee as a final version. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Ennis.
Yeah, thanks ever so much. This consultation that if we agree tonight will be linked in with the last discussion on the local transport plan. This is it's drawing together work that's already been done and work that needs to be done. You know, with electric vehicles and charging. You know, there's quite a note of progress in the report, but there's also, you know, work to be done further. As we said in the early discussion, is that, you know, people will use the car. People will still use the car. It is a very, very malleable form of transport and flexible. And it's really discussion with people what form of that car will look like, because the status quo is not viable. It's not achievable. And this is just one strategy that's going together. It's flexible. It can be updated. It takes into consideration other forms of, you know, vehicle, you know, infrastructure, you know, with charging such as hydrogen and whatever. So it's looking forward. It's a forward-looking consultation that we hope people will get involved with. It can be updated, as I said, and it's flexible. You know, and it's not without its challenges, because one of the major issues that more and more with electric charging and more moving to that, you know, forms of energy is what capacity can the electricity companies produce. That is going to be quite a challenge for us, and quite a challenge nationally. We hope there'll be a change of government and there'll be more of a link up and a pulling together, because if you look at the way water's going at the minute, I mean, that's not looking good. You know how that's happening. So we would look at how the power companies, SSE electric companies particularly, is that we push back to them and say, we got some great plans here, and here's a strategy and a consultation. Is how are you going to be able to manage that? How are we going to be able to power that? So it's not without the challenges on that of electricity capacity, and also the weight of the vehicles as well. It's not without challenges, because, you know, electric vehicles are heavier than the current ones we have of diesel and petrol, and the road infrastructure may have to change or may have to be amended to take into consideration the format of new electric vehicles. But I really do commend and hope we support the consultation going forward and hear what's coming back. Ready again, thank Chris and the team for what I believe is a comprehensive report ready for the consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ennis, and I'm going to open up to contributions from members. We have got several items left, so if I can request that points and questions are kept brief and to the point. Councillor Magon first, please.
Hello, sorry I was late today. I blame the Reading traffic. I've read through the consultation, and I appreciate it's all a very fluid, changing situation, isn't it, with technology and as things develop. The things I did pick up on apply to what's going on now, and presumably then will apply also going forwards. Particularly, I've had quite a few residents with electric cars in the Newtown area, where there already are some on-street charging points. And there seems to be some concerns that because these spots aren't in any way restricted, they're quite often obstructed by non-electric cars, meaning that residents can't use the existing charge points. I'm not an expert in this, but I don't know if there's any way of tackling that issue, particularly if we're putting in more electric charge points going forwards. And this ties into the, I was informed in the other meeting that the points in Palmer Park are due to go live, which would also take some of the pressure off these. But as we move forwards, I think that's quite an important point. Another point that I am interested in more for my own education is a lot of councils do have electric scooter rental already, don't they? I was wondering if that's something that has already been looked at, or if that's something that's coming in the future. Again, I'm new to this, pardon my ignorance, but I look forward to seeing the consultation progress, and yeah, just any clarification on that would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lanzoni.
Thank you very much, Chair. I welcome very much this electric vehicle strategy draft, and I was particularly impressed by the ability of our officers to propose us, we'll say, an open strategy. We are talking not of almost statutory strategy as the previous one, where we need to project a vision of our transport system. Here we are talking about a very, well, not very new technology anymore, but a new technology, something which is picking up with users in a significant way only recently. At the same time, we are finding that electric vehicles are not the solution to all evil, but they come with their own set of challenges and problems that we need to look out for, and also alternatives to the electric vehicles are being explored. And I really appreciate how officers have been able to draw pictures of a plan for our residents while keeping open to all these possible options, because the truth is we don't know what the less carbon emitting sector of transport will be in 15 years. So we need to try to, obviously, having a plan, but a plan that we can progressively change and tweak as the technology and the our residents' needs will change. So I appreciate that it's probably, I will guess, being a potentially more difficult strategy to draft than the previous one, and so it was much wider. If I can make a more personal and war-related comment, I was making a joke earlier about taking the bus from Lower Caversham to having to go to town to go to Caversham Heights. I was actually thinking to get an electric vehicle so I could go to Caversham Heights more easily. And one thing that it came up from the strategy is that the electric vehicle charging points are quite inhomogeneously spread in our town, and in particular we have only 2 of them in Caversham ward, despite being the best ward in town, and we've got only 9 Lords of the River. I think that I mean, this doesn't affect my overall judgment on the strategy, but I think that one of the points we may want to look at going forward, and potentially it will come out from the consultation, and this is why we take the strategy to consultation, is how we can give a more homogeneous provision of these charger across our town for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hornsby-Smith, I've got next.
Thank you, Chair. Again, like the other speakers, I find this a really interesting and an informative report, very carefully considered. I think one of the strengths of it is that, as Councillor Lanzoni pointed out, is that it is iterative, it's flexible, and it will have to be updated as we go along and find out more about this issue. I wanted to pick up on a couple of points. Section 2.31 talks about, refers to TR5, policy, local plan policy TR5, and it refers to the current policy, which has a 10% figure for electric charging points for parking bays and things like that. Well, I mean, I think that probably will need updating as part of the local plan review. Certainly, I note that the new building regulations for new buildings set out that there should be one charging point for every new car parking bay. So there's a disconnect, I think there that we need to sort of consider at some point. I wanted to ask a question, which is the level of demand likely to grow fastest for fast charge or slow charge locations in your opinion? And the third thing that I wanted to just make a note of and flag up really is that in the report there's lots of references to the council's car parks and use of electric vehicle charging points in those car parks, shared use for both visitors and people overnight who can park for free. I wanted to just flag up that there's no mention in the strategy about the shared parking bays. So the ones that are shared between residents permit holders and visitors. Now, obviously, 2-hour bays are not going to provide an opportunity for a full charge. But on the other hand, you know, a lot of people who come into Reading might want to avail themselves of those sort of things, as would the residents when they return home from work to make use of those bays in the evening. So I just wanted to check whether we're taking those on board, and just to flag that up, that it doesn't seem to appear. But otherwise, I mean, this is not a criticism of the report. I just think that, you know, this would be something that probably comes up in the consultation as well. But I think I found it a very informative report. I really enjoyed reading about the different sort of charging methods and the different speeds and things like that. Lots of information that I didn't know about. So I welcome it. I think it's an important, informative document to go out for consultation. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Moore next, and then we'll conclude as I've seen no further indications.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it short. Really pleased to see a strategy around this. I think it's really incredibly important to have an electric vehicle charging strategy. I think going to 3,000 electric vehicle charging points in 7 years is going to be incredibly ambitious and potentially not achievable, but we'll see how we go. I think right now we have around 15 chargers provided by Reading Borough Council, so that's quite a leap. It's not unachievable, of course, and I think from the document you'll see the upturn in actual electric vehicle ownership is only going to get more. I think as a town, it's going to be a challenge. Our Victorian terrace streets are going to provide their own challenges of a design that was put in before any of us were born. Maybe not, Councillor Page. But yeah, so I'll be really interested to see how it does. And I did receive brief from officers around this as well, and I'm very, very glad about hearing some potential ideas for how we might tackle those residential streets. And I believe that some things have already been achieved in other areas of the country, which I think can be successfully replicated. So happy to support this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. The majority of those questions were, I think, quite technical ones. So, Chris, if there's anything you want to come back on.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, and thanks again for the feedback. Yeah, so just to pick up on a few of the questions. So, yeah, so restricted parking spaces. So that is absolutely something that we recognise, particularly at the moment with the limited amount of chargers. So there's a couple of things, you know, first of all, as we say, is we really want to rapidly increase the number of chargers that are on street particularly. So the more chargers there are, obviously the more ability there is for people to park near them to use them. It is a balance at the moment with the, you know, relatively limited uptake of EVs, and particularly within the kind of resident parking zones, you know, Newtown being one of those areas, they're kind of oversubscribed anyway in terms of the number of people who want to use those spaces and park relatively close to their house. So at this point in time, I think it's a real balance between making sure that people can still park in their streets, but also going forwards, making sure that people can then access the charging points. So definitely something that we recognise and we'll be looking into. But I think it's, you know, putting in more chargers is going to be a really good first step for that. And then on the e-scooter trials, so yeah, you know, central government did provide an opportunity for local authorities to to come forward as trial sites. The nearest one to us is Slough. So we did consider this. You know, on balance, then there are clearly some benefits of e-scooters, but there are a number of challenges as well. So on balance, the decision was we would almost kind of learn the lessons from some of these other areas, and there are proving quite a few challenges at the moment before making a decision on what we did in Reading. The other point is at the moment, you know, the only legal kind of e-scooters on the public highway are on these trial government schemes. So it isn't legal currently to have an e-scooter on the public highway. You know, government has indicated that it might be bringing forward legislation looking at changing that, but that hasn't happened thus far. So clearly something we're keeping an eye on going forward. So,
Thank you.
And then, yeah, there's a couple. So around the kind of demand for slow versus fast charging. And I think one of the things is improved battery life in vehicles. So whilst at the moment, somebody might need to stop at fast or rapid chargers more frequently to top up the battery, as those battery life increases, then actually charging at home on a slow charge overnight when there's a cheaper tariff as well could get them through most of their journeys. Obviously, if you're taking a really long journey, you do need those fast and rapid chargers. So I think probably the slow chargers, and that's where, you know, we're considering in the strategy, where is the role of the public sector as opposed to the private sector as well. Quite a few locations, particularly fast and rapid chargers, are being provided by the private sector, less so the slow chargers in residential streets. So that's kind of where we see, you know, we could make the most difference to residents, but we are also working across Berkshire to look at that more strategic piece around, are there, you know, gaps in the fast and rapid charger infrastructure, and therefore can we do something to help plug those gaps as well. And then, yeah, so the shared parking bays, yeah, so absolutely, I think, you know, going back to the point around, we do need to consider the fact that people obviously need to park close to the charger to use it. So again, putting in more chargers initially, and it's that phasing between how quickly that transition to EVs is going to take off, and when, you know, we do have the ability, more residents have got EVs, for instance, then that could be the point at which, you know, there's that less demand for other vehicles to park close to their houses. So absolutely something to consider. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Unless there's anything that Councillor Ennis wants to add that wasn't covered in his opening. Okay, so we now move to the recommendations to note the work that's been undertaken and to provide approval to undertake the public consultation. Is that agreed? That's agreed. Thank you. The next item of business is agenda item 9, strategic transport schemes updates, and back to Chris.
Yeah, my last one. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so the purpose of this report is to provide an update on progress with the delivery of the current programme of major transport schemes in Reading. So this is a regular report to this committee. This includes major public transport enhancements for both bus and rail, active travel improvements for walking and cycling, and incentivisation and communication initiatives to encourage more healthy lifestyles. So it's a lengthy report, but just some of the key milestones include the launch of the Reading All Bus ticket, which is funded via the BSIP grant funding. So this sets a daily cap for bus travel within Reading. It also complements the national scheme for the £2 single fare. So we've put some usage data within the report. The other really exciting thing that we're looking forward to is the tap on, tap off, which the bus operators are working with us on. So again, that will just help people make it a bit simpler to travel by bus. And one thing our scheme does do is it's multi-operator. So somebody can travel with one operator for one part of their journey. And then if they're going somewhere else or returning and it's a different operator, then they can still use the same ticket. We've also secured an additional £1 million of funding from the DFT for the Bath Road Active Travel Scheme. And yes, as I think was mentioned previously, the significant milestone of the opening of Reading Green Park Railway Station. on the 27th of May, which was a very good day. And then in terms of the recommendation, so in order to adequately resource the delivery of this programme of major schemes, it is necessary to supplement in-house staff with additional consultancy support. Therefore, we're seeking authority from the committee to undertake a procurement to establish a framework agreement for the provision of transport consultancy services for Reading, with the appropriate delegations as set out in the report, and to approve the award of the resulting contracts. Thank you.
Thank you. In a moment, I'm going to go to Councillor Ennis, but could people please, while he's starting his remarks, indicate if they'd like to speak on this item? Councillor Ennis.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chris, for the report and also the presentation. I was going to go through the list of what you've done, but that's fine. You've saved me the time. But I will say that the achievement of winning bids from government shows that there's a creditable plan. There's a credible plan here to make transport more efficient, and to hit our targets of healthy environment inclusivity as well. I mean, as you'd know through the chair to Councillor Balls, 26 million was achieved for the bus improvements. It's not an insignificant amount of money from national government. I have to say that coming from adult social care, where we don't get anything, where we have to raise it through council tax, it's really heartening to get some money. So I'll do a backhanded thank you to the national government for 26 million, but it shows that there is confidence in what Reading is doing. It shows that national government officers, I've seen what's going on in this town with regards to bus travel, with the idea of cutting congestion through bus travel and other forms, and have given us a not insignificant amount of money. And there is a consultation going ahead at the moment, which has been mentioned with the 6, and we hope people get involved. We hope people in East Reading will get involved in a meaningful way, because possibly your politicians won't, but we hope the people of East Reading, because there is a major discussion going on about what London Road may or may not look like with regards of bus travel. And I know that we're working with partners. I know that Councillor Page and the officers have worked with Wokingham to ensure there's something to offer on the other side. It's something to offer on the other side with regards to Park and Ride and the success of Mere Oak. And there's a good number of buses coming through places like East and South Reading that will only get better. And we want that to grow throughout the town. And you can see this report, it hits every area of the town. The Green Part was an excellent. Reading West improvements, and Wendy will come on to that. The Shinfield Road, again, where we achieved funding, external funding, taking its time to be built. We're impatient. We want it done. And we're receiving feedback. We're not complacent, and this is what you'll get. We're receiving feedback all the time, and I know that officers are sensitive to making changes or making improvements to that. But here is a very, I believe, impressive list of what's going on in our town. School Streets programme, another one that's successful. We do need the input of residents and parents to ensure that works, because that would be more important for people who want to drive through there, to see that local people are actually taking control of themselves rather than a camera. I think, again, we can look further on that. So very much commend the report and thank Chris for the work that's been going on, and look forward to more improvements.
Thank you, Councillor Ennis. Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Chair. I think I can speak for my neighbours and residents around Reading West Station when I say we're really looking forward to the completion of the upgrade of the station. The refresh will bring a great deal to our area, and we're hoping to, looking forward to seeing it open later on this summer. It shows that we have an eye on the future with this development. There's still a little way to go, but it shows our continuing commitment to improving services for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. And final one from Councillor Moore, please.
Thank you. It's actually about Reading West Station as well. So it says the overall project is currently projected to be completed in the summer. Do we know when in the summer? Because I'd seen reasonably slow progress on the station, especially from the Tilehurst Road entrance. Just wondering if we had any further update on that. Thanks.
I think that was the same question as Wendy asked, but she just posed it slightly more diplomatically. Chris.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, so the work at the minute is being kind of managed by Great Western Railway. So it's their contractor doing the station work. So it was our highways team that did the initial works around the highway and the interchange. So we are in regular dialogue with them, obviously emphasising the importance of completing the work. The work that's going on at the moment is a couple of things. Firstly, it's the fit out of the building on the Oxford Road. So whilst you can't kind of see too much going on, there is work going on internally. And then I'm afraid to say it, but there is the Network Rail sign-off process. And whilst it's not as thorough as for a new station such as Green Park Station, there is still quite a process to go through, which Great Western are doing with Network Rail. So yeah, I mean, you know, the latest they've kind of said to us is kind of summer, end of the summer. You know, we are pressing them as far as possible and working with them. I mean, the one thing that we have said is around, you know, obviously the disruption with all of the temporary hoardings and everything at the moment, and as soon as some of that can be taken away, the better, just to improve things for people going along the Oxford Road at the moment. But obviously, you know, as soon as we have any more definitive timescales, I wish I could tell you them, then we'll make those public.
Thank you, Chris, and I'm sure that the railway companies will note this committee's exhortations for them to get that finished as soon as possible. I'm not going to read out I don't think there's anything more from Councillor Ennis. I'm not going to read out all of the recommendations, but they are as numbered 1 to 4. Are they agreed? That's agreed. Okay, the next item of business is borough-wide smoke area control declaration, and I'm just going to let Ross take his seat. Thank you. When you're ready, Ross.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, this report brings forward the proposal to revoke the existing smoke control areas in the borough and replace them with a single smoke control area covering the whole borough following a public consultation process. Smoke control areas make an offence to emit substantial smoke from a chimney within the air smoke control area and to comply with the rules, anyone wanting to burn. To comply with the rules, anyone wanting to burn solid fuel must use an appliance on the DEFRA exempt list or use an authorised fuel. Anyone not following those rules could be liable to a financial penalty of between £175 and £300 for an offence. Although these are available, or would be available, this would not be our first step, as we initially want to warn the resident and educate them about the issue. The proposal will raise awareness around harmful particulates produced by solid fuel burning and make sure that if people are going to burn solid fuel, they do it in the right way and minimise the amount of fine particulates that are released into the atmosphere for people to breathe in. And this action will result in cleaner air and in the longer term health benefits for those who live and work in the borough. As 62% of the borough is already covered by a smoke control area, the proposal will provide consistency across the borough to minimise any confusion about what can and cannot be burned in people's homes in different locations around the borough. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm going to hand over to Councillor Ennis, and again, if people can indicate if they wish to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to Ross for the report and the presentation. I think it's pretty clear and straightforward. It makes sense. Previously, only 62% of the borough was covered now to actually look at the whole areas. And again, it makes sense to ensure that we plan, like all these reports tonight, is a theme of making the environment better for the residents of Reading, and this is one of them where we can help people breathe more easily and not have to be subject to pollutants. So therefore very much commend the report and hope that we can support the recommended actions of 1 and 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ennis. And as I've seen no indications from members, I'd like to propose that we agree to the recommendations as written. Is that agreed? Thank you. Okay, the next item of business, and thank you, Ross. The next item of business is Low Carbon Energy Capital Investment Programme update, brackets annual report. And Peter Moore is attending via Teams. So over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll give you a brief introduction to the report. I know you've had a long meeting. This is an annual report, really just to keep members cited on progress with our low carbon capital investment programme. Really important to say at the outset that this is but a part of the Council's investment in low carbon and does not include some other significant and substantial investments in the capital programme relating to the vehicle fleet, active travel, other public transport projects, etc. So please don't get the idea that this is all there is. This is just a specific investment line that we devoted to improvement of some of our corporate assets. So that programme, as the report summarises, is now gathering pace. So we've spent about £2.5 million installing the heat pumps and additional solar in our leisure centres, putting EV charging infrastructure ready for the growing EV fleet into the Bennett Road depot and other measures at Bennett Road to achieve our vision of a zero carbon depot. We've got another £2.5 million that's now committed to major decarbonisation projects, principally heat pumps, which the idea is they will go into the civic offices and the Hexagon Theatre as part of the Levelling Up Fund programme for completion by March 2025. And the remainder of the original £7 million that was committed in the 2022 to 23 budget is allocated to projects that are in development. The proof of the pudding for these projects will obviously be in the actual emissions reductions that they deliver, and in November we will bring, as we normally do, our annual report to this committee, which will show how we're doing against our carbon plan target of an 85% reduction in corporate emissions by 2025. And we're currently on track for that, but a report in November will give you the latest picture on that. So it's a very ambitious target, but the projects I've mentioned and are covered in the report will put a sizable dent in that when they go live. And we've already started the conversations about what we might need to invest in future for that critical sort of 2025 to 2030 period, and that will obviously be brought back to members for discussion at an appropriate time for further consideration. But suffice to say, there's been a big commitment thus far, and we only keep that up if we're to hit our net zero by 2030 ambitions for the organisation. I hope that's a sufficient introduction. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that introduction. If members could please indicate if they wish to speak on this item, and I'll hand over to a popular fixture on tonight's agenda. Councillor Ennis, your fellow lead councillors are going to be jealous you're getting all the attention in this one.
Very nice. Thank you very much, Chair. And thanks very much for the report again. I think an outstanding report from Peter, who's done a lot of work as head of climate strategy to do, getting the funding. I really thank you for that and the presentation, getting the funding on page 344. If you can see how much money has been achieved, in capital programs, in getting us to a situation where we are working on nearly all our buildings or much of our main buildings in the council. We're really pleased about Palmer Park, the way it's been achieved, and reducing the emissions there as listed. Bennett Road, which has been a major issue in the past, depots are areas where the carbon, efficiencies are needed and carbon savings. And if you can have a look at that, that is an excellent, outcome. The question for these is to make sure we got the capacity to do so, because we know Heat pumps are very popular, and that's a way forward. But hopefully we'll be able to overcome the capacity issues, because we know certain planning applications that we agreed have got that. So again, it's capacities with other organisations, that we need to ensure that takes place for us, because our programme's ambitious. Our programme is incredibly ambitious to get to net zero. We are one of the greenest councils in the country, despite what some say. We are. The facts have proved it in the reductions in emissions over a period of time, and there may be issues with that post-COVID, but certainly since 2005, we were in the top 10 councils out of 320. And we should be proud of that, and we should be proud of the work that's going on here and the work that you're doing on drawing that. So very much recommend this report, and welcome a continuation of the reports that you bring about climate strategy, Peter, at SEPT, because SEPT can be, Chair, the effective body, if we can be adult enough to scrutinise the work of the council to ensure that we get to net zero by 2030. We should all be there. We should all be a part of that cross-party to ensure that we can scrutinise and get reports from officers like professionals like yourself, and we can question and then see how much progress we're making, but of course how much more progress we need to do to get there. So thanks ever so much, and recommend the report to SEPT, to the councillors.
Thank you. I've got one indication from Councillor Jutani.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to officers. It's a real pleasure to be here as a new member, new councillor, and a new member of this committee. This is impressive work, and I'm really pleased with what we've done so far. I'm pleased with the commitment that we've made. So my question is a bit more on the slightly more technical side, but it's I think an important one nonetheless. Just thinking around the level of demand and the kind of global context that we face, with demand for solar panels, demand for microchips, and supply chain shortages, the prices of all of the kind of core parts that we would need to make some of these green investments has shot through the roof. Can I just ask, what kind of assessment or prioritization exercise have you done around what can you achieve with what kind of funds, and how you might kind of prioritize over the coming years if it turns out that that you can't achieve everything that you've set out within existing budgets?
Thank you, Councillor. Peter, if you could pick that up, please.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for that question, Councillor. Yeah, it's a fast-moving area, and energy prices have been all over the place. And for a period when they've been high, and they're still higher than they were before the invasion of Ukraine really sent oil and gas prices through the roof. We've seen that made some of those investments you talked about, solar particularly, really quite attractive. And they still are. There's a very strong business case for solar. Some supply chain issues, but generally we've not had major difficulties getting the installations that we wanted to make in the past few years. Heat pumps, there is a significant issue in supply chain problems with heat pumps, but again, on latest intelligence, that's easing a bit. So for the civic offices project that I mentioned, we managed to secure a grant of £825,000 from the local enterprise partnership towards the cost of that project, which has to be spent by the end of March 2024, which is quite a tight timeline. And the biggest risk we identified within that was the sort of delay involved in ordering the actual heat pump equipment. But we've been reassured recently that timescale is coming down. So we're reasonably confident about being able to meet those challenging timescales. The assessment, to answer that question directly, it's a dynamic process. We're in constant contact with our finance colleagues. We make sure that the business case is robust for each individual investment that we make, and we get their input and sign off on that process internally. So that hopefully gives some assurance that we are, there is some sort of due diligence over each of the investments that we make. But it's a fast moving picture, but at the end of the day, if we want to meet our carbon targets and reduce our reliance on what will continue, I suspect, to be high and volatile fossil fuel prices, then we really need to make this transition, and it becomes a question of when rather than whether. Does that answer the question?
Thank you, Peter. As there are no further indications, I'm going to propose that we agree the recommendation as on the agenda. Is that agreed? Thank you, that's agreed, and that concludes the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.